wesn.
Tuesday, the 10th of January 2023. Good morning and welcome to Talking Points here on WESN, the content capital. My name is Keaton Shaw. It's a beautiful day. The traffic isn't as bad as it was yesterday, actually, so that is some level of relief, I suppose. But as we all make our way to our daily schedules and all the things that we must get done, I thank you for joining us on the program this morning as we continue the discussions. Most particularly, the Prime Minister held a press conference yesterday and said a lot at the same time while not saying much at all. In my opinion, it was a complete waste of time. But before we get into that, let me introduce my co-host and colleague. He's alongside me, Mr. Sean Michael Small. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Keaton. And while this has been, I guess, in some ways gripping the political headlines, with good reason, I find, again, the messaging, I do wonder. There are times I really don't understand. When you're a politician, you have some core functions or skills for your job. Communication is one of them. And part of communication is judging, hey, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? Should I say it? Should somebody else say it? Etc., etc. And I do find that I don't really see a level of consideration, of care, of long-term thinking, of forethought, of good judgment at times. And I do wonder, to what extent is it because our politicians are always chasing the base and how to impress the base and make the base happy and rile up the base? And to what extent is it that we're so complacent that we're devolving in certain aspects of our society, including how we communicate, how we resolve differences. And, you know, an example of that would be the crime situation, how we resolve differences. Well, now we have a 6-year-old that was killed, right? What looked to be like basically gunmen attacking a home and not caring who's in the house. Now a 13-year-old boy has been stabbed in his eye. And I would have thought that perhaps there would have been a bridge too far, a step too far for our society where criminals know, hey, if I cross a certain line, then things not going to be so nice for me. But it seems as though, no, now we're just way too complacent, way too insular. Don't want to get involved. I don't know what it is. And the don't want to get involved in crime, I think to some extent also translates to the don't want to get involved in politics.
I understand where you're coming from, and I suppose let's start with this actually. We could get into the Prime Minister's press conference a bit later on because it's just a continuation from yesterday. Mm-hmm. But it's a very good point that you raised because interestingly, on my way to it this morning, as I entered Port of Spain, more particularly by the Port of Spain market, that intersection, what I see many a times is school children walking on their way to school. Okay. And very, very young boys and girls. And one might assume that they're as young as an infant, probably the early years of primary school. And exactly what you just mentioned, a 6-year-old being shot and killed. We don't know who the intended targets were because gunmen just opened fire on almost everyone within the house. 3 individuals survived, the 6-year-old succumbed. Then a 13-year-old trying to protect their mother, stabbed in the eye and slashed in the face from the attacker. Police are now searching for that individual. I link this back to looking at school children, and I'm thinking, you know, even though they're on their way to school, do they know or do they understand that at any moment their life could be taken away from them? And as it may sound harsh, it may sound cruel, but that is the reality of where we're at as a nation. Things are not getting better. things have gotten worse. And you're right to the extent, and I believe that we raised this with the acting ASP late last year, that there seems to be no code amongst criminals anymore. Where a while back they would often say if a criminal was to do any harm to a child, any harm at all, other criminals, or if they were caught and sent to prison, prisoners would deal with them. They do not tolerate that at all.
I will go a step further. I would think that code might have been even throughout the society, as in, well, society will take, oh, you robbed me, all right. But you go after a child in the community, and maybe then the community is like, oh, no. We could still come together and beat you, and your compatriots will not condone your behavior, won't have your back. You will be alone throughout all circles. Well, your compatriots, on the right side of the law and the wrong side of the law. Nobody will defend you. But now it seems as though we don't, like, we're willing. I don't know if tolerant is the correct word, or if it's just, you know.
No, Sean,
we have no...
Plain and simple. Society has and is letting down the children of Trinidad and Tobago. The future of Trinidad and Tobago, if they are fortunate enough to live past the age of 30. Again, it may sound cruel, it may sound harsh, but let us be practical. I know I'm being pragmatic, but in this instance, and in most instances, what's the point in shying away from a conversation?
Well, here's a question. Could it be that the reason why we're less concerned about the future of our nation is because we're so worried about the present? It might be a subconscious thought, you know. Don't matter how good we get the next generation ready, there might not be anything for them anyway. We had to worry about number one first.
Well, yes, and that is a fair point, and there are many factors surrounding that. We are living in the present. We don't want to get involved in trying to reduce crime. I think we've now put all our apples in the basket of the protective services. And to a certain extent, you're right, they're there to protect and serve. However, my two theories with respect to crime and us not wanting to get in crime, one is not just a theory that I share, but the majority of people share, and that is simply because you do not want to say anything that will put your life in danger, because how we are in society now, you're so fragile when walking down the street, and you're so sensitive to just, if you look at somebody the wrong way now, you don't know how they're going to react. That's the mentality. The other theory I have is so many households and so many families have actually become involved in some form of criminal activity that, you know, we're not going to tackle on each other. You know, everybody's in this, everybody's involved, and it may be that they're the breadwinner. You know, even though if they're getting an income by illegal means, the legal way of getting things done is not working for me. The legal way of earning a living or getting an income is not working for me. I cannot live off of that.
And of course, there's always a question. So, a question I don't have an answer to. How did Venezuela survive the pandemic? When things were so bad before the pandemic? I don't know. I do know that there was a black market for foreign currency in Venezuela. That was a big deal over there that I think to some extent helped the wheels keep turning. Now in Trinidad, we don't know for sure that our economy is progressing because, you know, the legal side of it is doing well. You know, of course, there is the speculation by people that a significant chunk of our economy is from the illegal part of it, from the drug trade and all of that money that's either flowing through or coming in. So now the question is, okay, times are tough economically. It's not necessarily just the big shots that are going to be, you know, relying on less than legal means for income. As you're pointing out, more people might be looking at less than legal means, and then they themselves are less inclined to report because they know that, hey, if I snitch, I might cause a lot of issues for myself that I don't want to deal with.
More people looking at illegal means of getting things done is not a justification for actually doing it, in the sense that it's easier and satisfies my needs at this point. That no way is a justification, but it is just a theory that I'm putting forward for consideration. On the other side, you remember when you alluded to people living in the present and not thinking about tomorrow? Yes, because surviving today, you do not know whether or not you're going to survive today. A prime example is, oftentimes, and these are because of global factors, but also because of our society and our nation throughout the years, how we've actually failed to do certain things and implement certain things. The cost of food, for example. We often hear from the Minister of Health, we often hear from the Prime Minister and even the Minister of Agriculture, eat healthy. Eat healthy, live a healthy life, diet, exercise. That is going to equal to a healthy lifestyle, which in turn will reduce NCDs, which also will help with respect to aging and just generally the standard of living. So we're promoting that. But on the flip side, it's very difficult, and I think it's a point that I was discussing with one of our directors this morning actually. It's extremely difficult now to actually eat healthy. It's the cost of healthy foods, right? Fresh vegetables and fruit are very expensive. Very, very expensive now. Whether you be purchasing the imported product, which ironically is cheaper,
it's still cheaper, yes,
than the local product, by the way. So if anybody within the Ministry of Trade, anybody within the Ministry of Agriculture, or even the Ministry of Health are listening this morning, I know that probably when you go to the grocery, you don't have to look at your bill, but the cost of imported food is cheaper. It's not news, but fresh fruit and vegetable is so expensive, especially when it's locally produced. There are those that simply cannot afford it. They cannot afford to eat healthy. And because they cannot afford to eat healthy, it's going to lead to so many issues with respect to medical issues, lifestyle. It's going to have an effect on the health system. Yeah, as my director just pointed out, NCD as well, it's going to have a strain on the health system. It's going to have a strain on on longevity in terms of your life and how long you can live, which in turn affects Tobago on a whole, whether it be through crime, whether it be through national security, and it be the labor and job market, and it will affect our economy as well, as is what we're seeing now.
Okay, so a couple of things. First, with regards to this, because I want to get back to the crime thing and put forward a theory of my own. But with regards to this, economics says, okay, local food prices are actually higher than foreign food prices, but we have a supply problem. We know this because when the farmers got flooded out, prices went up again, right? So there's a market for local production and the prices are higher. So I would think that somebody, like economic theory says, somebody should be analyzing the situation and trying to figure out how can I profit from this, because there's a need here, right? And that's basic business. I meet a need and that's how my business is successful. If I try to do a business and nobody needs it or wants it, then it's not going to be successful. The fact that we haven't seen supply catch up to demand. I know we had the floods and that impacted supply, but we had that question even before the floods. That's worrying to me. What's going on? Why is it that our economic balance point, we can't reach it with regards to, or at least come closer to it? Maybe we did, right? But this is where leadership from the various ministries like agriculture and stuff to analyze the situation and publish data would be useful, right? Now, back to crime. I do think, though, that what we're seeing is a lot of consequences for decisions, because 10 years ago, right, we made some of the same decision 10 years ago. Oh, it's gangsters killing gangsters, right? I mean, even up to last year we were saying, well, it's gangsters killing gangsters. That's what we're hearing from the police. That's what justifies it. But there's an unintended consequence to that. When gangsters see that they could get away with murder left, right, and center because the police just don't seem to either have the time, have the resources, care enough, or even necessarily have the proper skills and tactics to investigate these murders or procedures, well, then now what's to stop me from opening up my target base because I'm a criminal? Why am I going to limit myself to going after other criminals. I'm going to commit crimes against people in general. And since I'm not going to be punished more often than not for it. And now that is somewhat of an unintended consequence that we as a society have to deal with. We allowed murders to get out of hand. And now we're wondering, oh, how did it get out of hand? Well, to some extent, it was allowed, I would argue. And the other thing is this. We talk about dependency all the time. So now again, dependency has an unintended consequence. We don't like what people who were dependent on the government, and when the government can't sustain all of the dependency, or the dependency to the level that people came to enjoy when we were a nation of oil barons, as someone I know from Tobago would say, we're a nation of oil barons. The homeless man on the street that still have mobile data on a cell phone, he is enjoying the life of an oil baron. But that life is over. And now, well, something had to give. And since we have this law enforcement, national security, judiciary system that's not working very well, it's easy path of least resistance. Let's go towards crime to make up for the shortfall.
I'll tell you what, I'd like to continue this conversation. I think at the latter third of this program, we can get into the Prime Minister's conference yesterday. We are delaying it a bit further. This is a very important topic, but also, like I said, I made no bones about it. I think the Prime Minister wasted time yesterday with his press conference, and therefore we will waste 20 minutes of our time on Talking Point this morning analysing it. And maybe, again, wasting time on Talking Point, not necessarily we have to analyse it, but at the end of the day, is it really worth it? Well, I suppose you can tell us later on after the 9 o'clock news on the hour. We'll be right back after this.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered.
The conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN Content Capital.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking Point here on WESN Content Capital. So before we took that break, my co-host Sean was referencing the dependency that society has placed upon government and the consequences as well with respect to criminals now realizing and understanding. It's not just now, but it's over a course of time that in TNT you can get away with almost anything.
You see this online because online tends to be whatever it is. It could be a chat room, it could be a video game, wherever you have a group of people coming together and they have to interact. You see that there will always be people that push boundaries. They want to see what they could get away with, right? And it's of course different than the real world, especially since there's a certain level of anonymity. So you have a lot less consequences to worry about. And it's very interesting to see to what extent, yes, you give people an inch, they will take a mile. They will push the boundaries, they will push your rules and regulations and do things that you don't intend. And I mean, you kind of see it all the time. The obvious example is with Gates. What the intention of Gates was somewhat undermined by some of the people that partook in Gates.
Now, going back to a couple of things with respect, I'll start off with dependency. In any budget that is to come, as we've seen with the last budget and the budget previously, when it comes to social expenditure and subsidy, the government will ensure that that is well placed, ensure that it is well funded. Now, it sounds that way in the budget, but there are people out there who are still waiting on government grants and government help. And that's for years now. Let's go back to the floods that they had. What year was it? Was it 2018, if I'm not mistaken? Those major floods in Greenville and in St. Helena and Kelly Village. People are still waiting for help. And now we've had new floods, and the government has now also put out more money. And I'm not sure with respect to that where we are. But government will always deliberately have society in their hands, simply because the more money we spend on social expenditure, grants and welfare, is the more people are going to like us. Yes, people need assistance, but again, if you teach a man to fish, he will eat for life. If you just give him a fish, at the end of the day, you're going to keep giving him fishes, he's going to keep coming back, and it's just going to be a strain upon the system.
But then now we have to take it a step further. He will feel entitled to the fish. And when you don't give him the fish, he might become violent because of it.
Which is what we are seeing now. We have not taught people how to swim. We have not taught citizens how to fish. We've kept handing that out because the money was flowing. And because we've handed out to that great degree, to that great extent, and by the way, Venezuela is a very good example of this, because when Hugo Chavez was in power, he took control of almost all entities and made them state assets. He put friends and family in those positions.
Loyalists, yeah.
And then on top of that, he increased social expenditure. In fact, Hugo Chavez was known for having competitions live on television, where he would call people and just give away televisions or give away cash. He had a lot of, which made him popular.
Very popular.
Which made him very popular. And it's a similar situation to which we're seeing in Trinidad now, because if you try to take away that level of expenditure, if you try to actually decrease it at all, the money is not flowing as it once did, but because people have become so dependent upon it, there is going to be a storm. With respect to consequences, it's not just the police, it's also the judiciary. If you were to sit down this morning and ask the Attorney General's office or any form of national security, whether it be the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, whether it be the Coast Guard, whether it be our regiment, because we don't have an army, we have a regiment, ask them, what do you really do? What does our regiment do? And I know it may sound like a stupid question. What does our Coast Guard do? Because they certainly don't patrol our borders and keep them secure. with respect to the TTPS, evidence-based prosecution, of which goes hand in hand with the judiciary. Where are we with that? I asked a question yesterday. How many gang members did we arrest? How many suspects did we arrest and question? How many crimes did we solve? How many guns did we take off the street? So, because criminals now understand that it's very easy to get away with things, not only have they become blatant and brazen, I mean, I think during the December month, criminals ran into the Tunapuna market and fired shots at an individual, killing them. Vendors had to scamper. They're not wearing masks anymore. They just don't care because they know, not they think, they know they can get away with it. So my question to you is it becoming more and more obvious that the system is deliberately designed this way, and politics and politicians speak what the population wants to hear while not acting what the population needs?
Well, so first of all, that answer is universally yes. In every country, country around the world, and including in Trinidad and Tobago, politicians will, their attempts at communication starts first with what I think the population wants to hear, to manage the population. Now, sometimes it's correct to do so, because you have to realistically manage expectations, and sometimes you're doing it in bad faith and it's unethical, because you're not trying to manage realistic expectations. You're trying to cover up things, you're trying to hide things. You're not lying. You're never lying.
You're misleading.
You're doing is basically, right now, is the system this way? I don't think the system is intentionally set up this way, but let's go back to the fish analogy. Because we are giving the man a fish, there's no longer infrastructure for him to fish. So because the government is doing this, all of these things, a lot of other things just get forgotten about, left by the wayside. And then all of a sudden now the government is like, we are for small business, we are for this, we are for that, we are for law enforcement. But the systems in place, the infrastructure in place is not there. And you can't expect the private sector. The banks will take care of themselves. They're not going to take care of other people, right? The fast food chains are going to take care of themselves. They're not going to take care of other people. Private enterprise takes care of its private enterprise. It does not take care of other private enterprises. Private business is not in the business of helping other people make money. That's not how it works. It's a model for distribution that says we will allow the individual interests to compete, and that's how we will efficiently get our resources distributed. But for the sake of setting things up and maintaining systems, you need the government to do that. But what is the government too busy doing? It's too busy trying to win the next election, trying to appear to look good, to be popular. Same thing for the opposition, by the way. It's same side, two sides of the same coin, right? And the sad part about it is, to some extent, one could argue it's necessary. Because if one of the two parties in Parliament, right, try to say, oh, we're just gonna go all on ethics like today, to some extent, it's not gonna be that popular amongst the people. Because the people are going to buy the cheap, easy, sensationalized message that's very surface level, and they're not gonna have the patience for the person, like what happened with the NAR, right? Where, no. Sometimes we have some hard lessons and some hard messages. I mean, look, even what little that the PNM has had to do to navigate through the current situation, a lot of the times the population didn't like it and doesn't want to hear it, despite the fact that, A, it's not as though money is growing on trees or oil is just, pouring out to the ground and we can't keep up with collecting it. That's not the case anymore. But we are stuck in that mode, that entitled mode, where the government just give us fish. Or there's crime? No. We'll give you enough fish so that there won't be enough crime. What about having a police service? Nah, we giving people fish. We giving people fish.
But
they're
Sean,
fine. They're happy.
Sean, a couple things. One, they're not giving out fishes anymore.
Well, that's the problem.
So
that's the catch.
They're promising fish. They're not giving out fish. Moving away from the fish analogy. everything that we've discussed thus far for the morning can be summarized in one phrase. There is a government, but there is no governance, right? You have a government in place, you have a cabinet that has been appointed, you have ministers who have duty and responsibility to the nation, and you do not have governance. You have individuals who are in positions, and I think what we've also learned with respect to the pariah, I raise this issue now, is that I think pariah perhaps is the most obvious form of nepotism now, where you have this major company, which is one of two that is in charge of oil and gas, energy in Trinidad and Tobago, on the part of the state, that has no experts, no expertise, or no one who is suitably qualified for any of the positions.
Was that a caller? Did the caller say that on air? That all of the people with experience were let go and replaced by people that don't know what they're doing?
I cannot recall.
I believe he said it on air. But I will also say pariah is an example of complacency in the public sector.
Right. The point I'm trying to make is, and I raise pariah as an example, is because what we have grown so accustomed to, and what we as a nation have accepted, and this is where I blame all those who dip their fingers in red every year. We want change. We don't change our mindset. We hope for something different. We don't act upon it. We have words of criticism, but we never actually take any form of collective action. We are blind by our own ideologies, if you have an ideology at all. The reason why I say that is because if your ideology is the color of your skin, the color of your party, or what's their surname, because there are many out there like that, then quite frankly, you are part of the problem. We've accepted that Trinidad and Tobago, let any government come in, let they be voted in, state boards are fired from the previous administration, all those who are working on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago are recalled, there's some issue with respect to their contract, they're removed, and we put in our friends and family. Whether or not they can get the job done, that's an entirely different story. But they're there, they're collecting a salary, nothing ever changes, nothing is ever corrected, nothing gets fixed. There's no efficient or effective form in place. And that is why I say you have a government, but you have no governance. How has Trinidad and Tobago grown and developed in the last, and I'm going to say last 13 years? Because even though we've put up new infrastructure, and even though we've put up buildings, those buildings are not even maintained. And sometimes those buildings are completely unnecessary. The point is, our mentality cannot be, because I see a new building, the government is working for me.
The sad part is, you say it all the time these days, and you're right. We know, we have all the examples. Pariah is just the latest. Gate is a perfect one about how we cannot implement things properly, right? Yes, on the surface, I am a government employee. I rightfully access Gate to gain a higher level of education to get a promotion. That out of context is fine. I have no problem with that. But the context that matters is the fact that a lot of people use it, whether in the public or private sector, but I think it's more egregious in the public sector for obvious reasons. They use it to get a raise. I don't know if there was a position open. I don't know if the raise warrants the actual job that they ended up doing after they got the raise. You know, to what extent are they giving production back? In the private sector, that's not going to fly, for the most part. But in the public sector, it seems as though it was just, Gates was just used to get a piece of paper to get more money. But we didn't actually get anything as a society out of it. The public sector didn't become more efficient. The public sector didn't seem to become more educated and more professional and more capable out of it. It's going the same that it's always been. The hard-working drones that keep their head down and keep the system running are the same people. The ones who wanted to get ahead and get more money, well, you know, they work in the system the same way. They just have more paper to do so with. And I said it before and I'll say it again. But the question is, who put us there? But it's without a shadow of a doubt in my mind. Yes, 4 men died in a pipe in Pariah. The country is in a rhetorical pipe being choked out by the fumes, the leftover fumes of the oil. And we are still waiting on somebody to save us. And those who are political diehards, for whatever reason, think their party is the key solution, despite the fact that nobody could point to any real significant difference in behavior, right? It's just more of the same if you really want to be truthful to yourself. So we're choking out in that pipe. Our deaths are just going to be slower.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me just quickly correct myself before we go to our second break. When I said that there is, and I was not clear enough, and it's miscommunication on my part. When I say that there is government, but there is no governance, I was rather misleading in the sense that there is a government, but there is no good governance. And that's me clarifying, right?
Yeah.
There is a government, but there is no good governance.
I would say our elections for the last 20, 30, 40 years is not who would be good. It's just who will give us, something, some average level of governance to keep the country moving. That's the best we could hope for, really and truly.
So what we do, let's take a break now on the program. When we return, we will discuss with whatever time that we have left, probably about 15 minutes, the Prime Minister's press conference yesterday, as we continue to keep an eye on who takes over the office of the President of Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be right back after this, ladies and gentlemen.
On the next episode of Nicole Larson Live, Living in Victory Every Day.
I live with my dad at the time, so what is he going to say? He has invested so much into me and into my studies and, where I was going in life. And then, to come to him with these news. So the first thing I did legit after finding out I was pregnant was actually trying to make a call to see how I could get rid of it.
Which is that we shouldn't condemn others for the mistakes that they would have made.
Whether it's your savings or the business savings, deduct a small amount first and set it aside for a rainy day.
Replaying situations in your mind, questioning yourself if you did or said something wrong, pushes you right into the circle of anxiety.
From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God.
No matter what they say, living in victory every day.
Nicole Larson Live, Living in Victory Every Day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the right and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Welcome back to Talking Point. With 13 minutes before the 9 o'clock news on the hour, I will give this time now to Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and the press conference which he held yesterday. Now, if you missed it, we just read for you segments of it. He essentially came and he spoke for some time. He slammed the opposition for creating fear-mongering amongst the citizens with respect to Christine Kangaloo's nomination on behalf of the People's National Movement to be the next president of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, he said many things, and at the same time, he said very little. I'm not entirely sure what was the purpose or the point of the press conference when he can simply do what he usually does and post either to his personal social media page or via the Office of the Prime Minister's social media page. But he chose to hold a press conference and, well, I will not get into the conversation with respect to what he said about Senator Wayne Mark, but interestingly, he walked with a copy of the Constitution. He referred to Section 24 of the Constitution, which states, and I quote from the Constitution, where a member of the Senate or the House of Representatives is elected as president, his seat in the Senate or the House of Representatives, respectively, shall thereupon become vacant. He said that the Constitution makes it clear, for such a scenario. And I quote now from Dr. Keith Rowley, this means in simple English that the framers of this Constitution, the Constitution which I swear to uphold, conveniently said, is that it is anticipated and it makes provision for a member of the House of the Senate to be considered, to qualify, to be elected, and to be voted into office as president of this country. It says when that happens, the person must immediately give up that position in the parliament. So you're trying to make an argument that somebody within the Senate can be made president. Now, I have not argued against that, and I don't think anybody has argued against that. But if the Prime Minister chooses to conveniently remind the citizens, or should I say himself, that he has sworn to uphold the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, and he also chooses to conveniently quote Section 24 of the Constitution, why is it that he also didn't quote that the Constitution says or suggests that any individual who is going to be the president of Trinidad and Tobago should be impartial and not hold any political affiliations? Why is it that the Prime Minister can do that? Goes back to what you said. Misleading.
Yes, because
deliberately.
The thing is, so both, and this is why I have an issue with Senator Mark's initial criticisms and now with the Prime Minister's response. First of all, the Prime Minister's reporter has said that Senator Marks was basically spewing horse manure. I think that's uncalled for. Again, if you want to be considered better than your opposition, you actually have to not go down to their level. Because Mr. Marcos started in seminary language, you don't continue. It's not a tit for tat. Now, with regards to matters of procedure, I think Senator Mark made the mistake first if he wanted to question, well, how does somebody sitting in the Senate become president? I don't think in any jurisdiction you holding a lower office is going to prevent you from assuming higher office. And there's an obvious provision for that. Now, the provision to replace the person might not be so easy, but in our parliamentary system, the senators are not elected. So it's not like trying to replace an MP. And I'm sure that if an MP was chosen, I'm getting to the other part, right? I'm just saying that there will be some sort of, special election or something, right? Okay, fine, cool. Or however it's done. And if we don't have that provision, that's just one more reason why we need constitutional reform. But that doesn't mean that we tell the MP, no, you cannot assume a different office or a higher office, right? Cool. Now, with regard to the Prime Minister, yes, because Senator Mark opened the door, he's taking the opportunity to just focus his counter on the parts that he wants to focus on, so that it gives it a certain amount of legitimacy. And to be fair, it is a tactic in debate that, debate 101, lawyering 101, don't mind that he isn't a lawyer. So to some extent, we can't fault him for that, except he is the Prime Minister, and this is not just some minor matter, this is a major matter. And it would be much better for Dr. Keith Rowley, Prime Minister Rowley, if he was able to have all his ducks in a row and his decisions were, for reasonable thinking people, ironclad. The problem is it's not ironclad. It's not to say that there is no basis on, or there's no good reason to consider Christine Kangaloo for president. There are, right? Mr. Porter Spain himself believes that she will be a good candidate as the individual. The issue that the political analysts and critics have is that, listen, this does seem to go against the intention and the role of what is stated, how the president is chosen, because she is a party card holder and holds a significant position for one political party. Currently, she is not a backbencher.
Let me just point out.
She holds a significant position, so it's very hard to say she's going to be impartial.
Let me just point out where the Prime Minister is deliberately misleading. And he's also an individual of convenience, because he contradicted himself yesterday.
Oh.
He did. Oh. He says, he emphasized that a public speaker or public leader must renounce any political allegiance during their office, and he was referring to Bridget Annison George, who is the Speaker of the House. Now I'm quoting now from Dr. Rowley. Once they were identified, referring to the Speaker of the House, Bridget Annison George, in that post of Speaker or public leader, they never acted for the PNM again, every single one of them. Well, clearly, this individual, when he's sitting in the House of Representatives, does not hear Speaker Bridget Annison George.
He might have gotten away with it, ironically, if he said that about Christine Kangaloo, not with Bridget Annison George.
This is where he contradicted himself. Remember, he emphasized that a public speaker or public leader must renounce any political allegiance during their office. He said, and I quote again, "You cannot be an independent in the cabinet. Our Constitution does not make provision for anybody in the cabinet who is independent on any issue. The day you find yourself at variance with the collective decision of the cabinet, you have to leave the cabinet." Do you understand the contradiction? Do you see? At the same time, whilst he's suggesting that Bridget Annison George has never acted for the PNM and is no longer an ally of the PNM because they are now the Speaker of the House, he's also suggesting that the Speaker of the House is part of Cabinet, that you cannot be an independent in Cabinet.
Speaker of the House?
Yes, of course. Remember, Cabinet is the collective as a whole, right? What he goes on to say...
No, but Keith, I would just like to point out, you cannot sell to the public. I understand what he's trying to do. And whoever advised him on this course of action was not very wise to do it. When the husband of your example, the political appointee husband of your example, is potentially at the center of a major controversy, and his role in the controversy is not what he did, it's what he was incapable of doing, to basically show in a very bad way the negatives of political appointment. There could be other political appointments that are successful. I'm not saying no, right? But here's an example, a negative example of why we might want to say ex-nay on political appointments. That's her husband. He's in a position where in other scenarios, under other circumstances, he would have already been removed. But he's not.
Yes, but
so the optics of it is, who is going to believe that she is going to be independent of the party, regardless of all of these procedural things with regards to her role as Speaker? Nobody is going to buy that in TNT.
Now,
nobody.
What he also went on to refer to, he said, this matter is going very smoothly according to the practice, according to the Constitution. Government, having looked across the population, having picked a nominee who I dare say has found favor with a wide section of the population, and the government stands by that, a wide section of the population. But he goes on to say, if we stay with the facts, if we stay with the Constitution, if we stay with knowledge that you're going to please everybody that you're not going to please everybody, but you can please the majority or a large majority of the people, then this country has no problem. I think I will agree to a certain extent where he says that they've found favor, but at the same time, one might argue Israel Khan has also found favor.
I would argue that the candidate herself,
I think
we're not really debating her as an individual. What we're debating is her position is being put in a very unfortunate situation that it is very difficult for any objective person to accept easily.
Now, I think people in Trinidad and Tobago also do not care who the next president is. And I think that they should care. Because
Police Service Commission.
People don't understand the role of the president, which I think Dr. Bishnu Ramnath pointed out. We need to educate the population on the role of the president. Because at the end of the day, the president doesn't need to... the president declares a law, but once Parliament passes a law, that's more or less it. The president has no military power, even though they refer to as commander-in-chief. It's the prime minister who's the head of the National Security Council.
Right.
In fact, the president, as far as I'm concerned, is nothing more than a strain, again, on our finances.
But
because they cost a lot in terms of travel, cost a lot in terms of housing, cost a lot in terms of security. What are the returns? And I think that is why, to a certain extent, the prime minister is right in suggesting that he's found favor with a wide number of people, because that wide number of people will probably be the People's National Movement Party, but not necessarily the population. I disagree with Christine Kangaloo being the nominee. You mentioned Bridget Annisette George, and by the way, Israel Khan was a former member of the NAR, but he resigned I think in 1994, if I'm not mistaken, he resigned. Look at Christine Kangaloo, for example. Christine Kangaloo is married to Kerwin Garcia. If I'm not mistaken, Kerwin Garcia's father is former Minister of Education. Your former principal, Anthony Garcia. Christine Kangaloo's uncle is Noel Garcia, who is, I think he's chairman of UDCOS. Is he chairman of HCC as well? You know, so bear all these things in mind. She's also related by marriage, not by blood, but by marriage, to Chief Justice Ivor Archie.
No, I get that. Her basically the circumstances around her makes her as a candidate that's difficult to accept. So I get it. I think the Prime Minister thought, okay, look, the individual looks good on paper, right, with regards to just her in a silo. The problem is people are more than just that. People are also the networks that they're connected to and the sum of their experiences, and whether they like it or not, the people that they associate themselves with. Ironically, you're not going to tell, the Prime Minister is not going to say, oh, well, she associated herself with the wrong people. No, obviously not. But the point is, she is politically associated, and it brings up independence.
If you're a party card holder or active within the party, as is Christine Kangaloo and her entire family, then quite frankly...
Could you say this is one area where we could say, well, this is not something that the PP or previous administrations did that the current government is just
I think Dr.
following
Keith Rowley,
fashion?
I think this is the most blatant move by Dr. Keith Rowley, and he doesn't care because, quite frankly, he could get away with this.
Could it be that there's no other candidate?
It is the independent senators, and according to Dr. Keith Rowley, you cannot have an independent in cabinet. It is the independent senators who can decide, who will decide who the next president is.
Well, here's the other thing. Well, first of all, now we're going to answer that question of how independent they are, we're going to answer. But
no, go ahead. No, actually, not hold on that point.
Yeah.
We have to break for news on the hour. But to me, the best example of an independent speaker within the House of Representatives does not come from Trinidad. It comes from the United Kingdom, the House of Commons. Former Speaker of the House, Mr. Simon Burkow. He was Speaker of the House from 2009 to 2019, and a Member of Parliament for Buckingham from 1997 to 2019. And he's the best example of being a Member of Parliament for a political party, which was the Conservatives, but being independent as Speaker of the House. Best example, John Simon Burkow. If you get the opportunity, go do some research. We have to break for news on the hour. We'll be right back after this, to which Sean will make his point.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Prime Minister accuses Wademark of misleading the population. Former Senate President weighs in on presidential pick. Opposition condemns the non-dismissal of National Security Minister. And internationally, California braces for severe storms after 12 killed. Now for the details. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has sought to respond to opposition Senator Wademark regarding his remarks on Senate President Christine Kangaloo's nomination to be head of state. The Prime Minister said this was a clear attempt to mislead the population.
The bottom line is that there are people in this country who set out deliberately to mislead the population, and I will go as far as to say to incite the population. This is fear-mongering of the worst kind, and it's purely for one purpose: to cause the population to be incited against the actions of the government.
In a conference held on Monday afternoon, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley said this move is within the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The Prime Minister said that Kangaloo's seat would become vacant on her exit from the Senate.
I want to repeat that for the public who has been fed all the horse manure coming down from the UNC and those others who talk about the Constitution, because they are rooting their argument against the government's actions in unconstitutionality. This is what the Constitution says for all of us. Where a member of the Senate or the House of Representatives is elected as president, his seat in the Senate or House of Representatives, respectively, shall thereupon become vacant.
Dr. Rowley also confirmed that Kangaloo has gotten the full support of the government.
As I speak to you now, she has been duly nominated by probably all the members of the government side, because the opposition having indicated that it will have no part of it. We have a duty to put in at least 12, because you need 12 nominees to make the nomination valid, and all our members were keen, and I suspect that they would have all have signed.
While former Senate President Timothy Hamill Smith says the process for the selection of a president should begin with what is expected of the prospective candidate.
At very least, you'd think that if we started with what does the process require, what do we want to see in a president, you might get consensus around that. But if you don't start there, then politicians being politicians, I doubt you'd get very much consensus if you just put personalities on the table.
Speaking on WESN's AM Prime, he explained that a lack of due process will create undue contention on both sides of the divide. He weighed in on the disadvantages that government's pick Christine Kangaloo could face.
She's now had, perhaps one hand tied behind her back. She starts regardless of her potential, she starts with a limitation, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
If she's able to overcome that, that depends a lot. But, the bar is set so much higher for her to do so.
Opposition PRO Dr. Kirk Mayhew has condemned the Prime Minister for the failure to dismiss the National Security Minister. This comes following the latest murder of a child, 6-year-old Kylie Maloney, on Sunday.
Prime Minister Keith Rowley irresponsibly, cruelly and bullheadedly stands by the abject failure, incompetent and embarrassment Fitzgerald Hines as Minister of National Security. For the sake of our people and especially our children, Keith Rowley, Fitzgerald Hines and the entire government have to go in the soonest possible time.
In international news now, California is bracing for more severe weather this week, with forecasters warning of an incoming relentless parade of cyclones. The U.S. state has already suffered a week of torrential downpours and damaging winds that killed 12 people in 10 days, Governor Gavin Newsom said. More than 120,000 people are still without power as of Monday morning. The governor warned on Sunday that the most brutal weather is due within the next 48 hours. Well, that was your news of the hour on WESN. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for watching.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Talking Point here on WESN Collins and Capital. Thank you very much to Denise Martin for news on the hour. And just before we open up the phone line, Sean Michael Small, you had one point I think you wanted to make.
Yes, I wanted to make this point. Bear with me. So we talk about the Police Service Commission a lot. I find that it didn't get enough press. I thought the opposition contributed to allowing the story to die when they eventually went into their back and forth with the independent senators, right? But before that, what were they doing? They were trying to impeach the president. Why? Because the fiasco with regards to the Police Service Commission to some extent went through the president, the house of the president, or the office of the president. Blissy Prasad went to the president. There was a meeting at her residence. The prime minister, he tried to deny it, and I think eventually had to admit it, went and met with the president. So with regards to what does the president do, there might be one or two key things. It could just be functionary, right? It's not as though she's making decisions, but it still has to go through her office because that's what's on the law books. And if the person has, there is a little bit of wiggle room where the president might be able to interfere with the best laid plans of mice and men. Because again, that was a fiasco with regards to questioning the independence of the Service Commission. And there I say that's where I really started questioning the independence of the then or sitting president, the current outgoing president, Paula Mae Weeks, right? How independent is she? Well, she didn't look that independent in that situation. Of course, it would have helped if we got a proper explanation, but none of the parties involved offered up a proper explanation. Meanwhile, now we come to this situation here, now moving forward, where to me it's very obvious, not only are you picking a candidate that cannot look independent, but you just had a fiasco where the independence of your independent institutions come into question that involve this very office. So the optics to me now, it's not that far of a stretch to go where the UNC is arguing. One could argue that the UNC's arguments are not necessarily the best. But I would like to find out, was not the Prime Minister properly advised, listen, this is not going to look good. This is going to look as though the independence of independent institutions are being potentially undermined.
Perhaps he was advised and just did not take the advice.
Right, and that's the thing. This entire scenario lends credence to your opinion that he doesn't care about the consequences and he's moving forward anyway. And I would like to know how and why he thinks that's a good idea, because I believe that will reveal a major weakness in our political landscape.
No, it doesn't matter. This is, as I said, this is probably his last term. I think he mentioned that in the last election. But let's open up the phone line now, ladies and gentlemen. Call in and join us on Talking Point, where you can share your opinions and thoughts with us. We already have a call on the line with us from San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
My gentleman, morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As they say, trying to beat the iron while it's hot. you know, Sean, thank you for articulating what I've been saying all the time about GATE and its contribution to lack of productivity within the public service. Thank you for that. Back to what we're talking about this morning with the election of Christine Kangaloo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, before that statement that the Prime Minister made about Mr. Mark fearmongering, before Mr. Mark had made that statement, once that announcement came out, I had issues with Christine Kangaloo with potential, I remember I said yesterday, potential bias. I listened to Mr. Where was he yesterday? Cascade?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he was Cascade yesterday. I listened to him.
Yes.
And I hear what he said. However, just what you spoke about there with the merit list. So when it was taken, and that fiasco with the merit list and the present president, who, when she was elected, if you look at her, she, as far as I'm concerned, seemed to be very independent.
Seems to be, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at her on the face, she seems to be very independent. I am not willing. Let Dr. Rowley know this. I am not willing to take the chance because that's what we're doing, you know.
Essentially,
that chance we're taking with Christine Kangaloo and all that we know of her and her relations. And I am, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, not willing to take that chance.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I stand today.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller.
Well, from what I understand, Paula May Weeks has personal connections to people associated around Dr. Keith Rowley's circle.
I think also
and that's all I'll say about
that point, the synopsis of your entire point with respect to not taking that chance. We had a caller yesterday who, you know, we shared different opinions, and I respect his opinion. But the caller said that we should not judge before the individual enters office. We should give everybody a chance. I'm not
Catch-22 elections.
I'm not willing to take that chance. I'm judging based off of her position in government prior to her being nominated for the presidency, as well as why am I going to wait 5 years and risk it? It's not worth it. We've already seen what has happened in the last 5 years. Why am I giving that chance? I already have an idea or knowledge. We have a caller on the line with us from Pitti Valley. Good morning, caller.
Morning, Sean and Keaton.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My point this morning is on the president election.
Sure.
We love to bang about constitution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it anywhere written? I read the constitution. I went and read it before calling. Is it anywhere in the constitution was written that you cannot pick somebody from parliament or from a party? I guess no. Mm-hmm. Everything the Prime Minister is doing is straight from the Constitution, what allows you to pick a president. Flip it, if the opposition was in power, they would follow the same Constitution and pick up them candidate, and I guess the PNM would have screamed too. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying, you all should think all the arrows or people are the people who wrote the Constitution or change it. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, it will be Christine Kangaloo, and he's following what the Constitution said to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Have a nice day, sir.
Thank you very much. Now, caller, you make an excellent point with respect to those who wrote the Constitution. And the thing is, I can also point arrows at those who have had opportunities for many years since we've gained independence.
Well, nobody has.
To not rewrite the Constitution, or at least put forward proposals for rewriting the Constitution, one that is reflective of Trinidad and Tobago. We've borrowed or we've copied the Constitution that is Canada's, and up until this day we have not written a Constitution that is fitting for Trinidad and Tobago. That being said, I'm glad that you read the Constitution, because I'm going to ask you, did you read the parts of the Constitution which suggest that the President should be impartial, should not hold a bias, and a bias of which we've already seen portrayed by Christine Kangaloo? Again, it's not the individual as such. She has a very good background in terms of her education. It's just the mere fact that she has held political office. She has been on a political platform.
And she's
she has
a party card holder.
Campaigned on behalf of the PNM, and yes, she is a party card holder.
The problem is sometimes the language is not objective, it's subjective, right? What is bias, etc., etc. And to deter an outsider looking in, it's hard not to say that she will not have some form of bias as a current party card holder.
And I think the caller from San Fernando made a very good point with respect to a president that seemed to be independent. But then look what happened with the Police Service Commission. You never know what can happen again, especially with somebody who is not impartial. We have a caller on the line with us from Port of Spain, and I think we've lost that caller. I actually do apologize for that caller. Can we just take over that? Thank you very much. Yes, caller, I apologize for that. We do have some time before we close the phone lines. You can call back in, but I'm sorry for having kept you waiting that long.
Just want to warn people, please don't wait until 9:22 and then we have about 3 or 4 calls trying to call in. I believe we only have one phone line working, so as it's clear right now, call in and get your voice heard, your opinion heard. Whether we agree or disagree, we don't mind, So, as we have a caller now from Diego Martin.
Good morning, caller.
Hi guys, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, but sorry, no Happy New Year to you, Sean and Keaton. Keaton, I'm going to help you out here with the COVID because I know the other C words, Crime and Christine, have dominated the show. So the latest is the XBB 1.5, the most dominant subvariant now. So you could kind of call that the great-grandchild of Omicron, because if you remember in early 2022, there was the variant BA2. Then came 2 descendants of that, which came together and formed XBB, which dominated Singapore a few months ago. This has now become XBB 1.5, which of course is more contagious, though not necessarily more virulent, now making up 28% of cases in the U.S., where about 500 people are still dying every day. Our figures here are rising. People know what to do, but like everything else, people will do what they want, which brings me to Keaton. I agree with all that you said yesterday. I do not believe that Christine Kangaloo can be impartial. She's not impartial now. How can she be then? And what sticks out most for me about her is, if you recall, her termination of Jawala Rambaran, as requested by Colm Member some years ago, just as the merit list is for me with this president. That's it for now. I'll tell you what I think about Kylie, that adorable little girl, tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much, caller, for your contribution. It's good to hear from you, and regardless of what you may say or think...
Happy New Year to you.
Well, he beat me to it, but a Happy New Year to you. But... yes, you're right. Christine and crime is essentially what's dominating right now. But an unfortunate prediction. Is it really a prediction, or is it perhaps what is going to happen? Prediction. Crime and Christine dominates right now, but Carnival and COVID is right around the corner. Right? And bear that in mind. The government has remained silent. It seems as though that the Minister of Health himself has disappeared, and they have remained very, very quiet with respect to COVID-19. Because you know why? The mother of all carnivals is about to happen. We don't want to take that away from the people.
Just in time for the sequel.
But if there is a lockdown again, good luck.
Just in time for the sequel.
We have a caller on the line with us from Tobago. Good morning, caller.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
You moderators, Keishan and Small.
Good morning.
The question is, right, concerning the presidency, it is of my opinion that Ms. Kangaloo will do a very good job, even though she may have come from the political landscape. But remember, there was an astute Tobagonian there who came from the bowels of politics, sitting in Parliament. And to me, he was one of the better presidents that has reigned over Trinidad and Tobago. So it's up to the individual whenever he or she gets here. And furthermore, there's nobody in Trinidad and Tobago that doesn't have a choice politically. Thanks for listening, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, caller, for your contribution. I mean, you make a fair point.
That last point, I think that's the key, right? If not her, who? That's the real practical sticking point of this debate. You know, who else? And I don't know. I really don't.
I'll tell you what. I'll nominate this individual to be president. This next caller. Good morning, caller from Shigones.
Morning. Christine Kangaloo is the best choice for president. Yes, she is born into a political family, as we may say. Did you know that her father was the mayor of San Fernando? Her brother is a leading doctor in the country on many state boards. Christine Kangaloo, being born into that family and into the PNM family, that should be an asset. And furthermore, what should really be concerning is not that the fact that she should be president as she will get the support of the government, is that even look at the opposition choice. It's pathetic to say the least. And furthermore, it's a disrespect to all the major UNC stronghold supporters from way back. It is a total disrespect. And lest we forget, the UNC had their chance to select a president and they chose Kamuna, which was a failure. If this selection, especially with the second woman, an East Indian woman, president, is a strategic golden move from Dr. Keith Rowley, and it also shows that the PNM is the only real political party, multi-racial party in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller, for your contribution. Now, I'm trying to figure out whether the caller was being a bit facetious or whether he was being genuine in his point.
I think he was being genuine. I do like the point. I think we disagree why Israel Khan as a candidate is bad. I don't have an issue with the gentleman, again, per se. It's the circumstances around him that makes, and I understand what the UNC might have been trying to go for. You know, we don't agree, we don't see eye to eye, but we're willing to put him up because he will, you know, he obviously is not going to be UNC, what's your word, sycophant, right? I mean, that's to some extent, that might be halfway reasonable to say. The problem is it's hard to take it seriously because we know how politics are, and we know the fact that he was, you know, 1 foot out the door, you know, maybe even 2 feet out the door, because I think one of the, not too long ago, maybe a couple of months ago, he was being pulled into a public debate with the opposition leader, not necessarily trying to go too much against her, but being sucked in by the political drama that was happening to the opposition time. I can't remember what it was. So it is a joke for the opposition to put his name out there. He himself, I wouldn't say is a joke, but the putting him as nominating him is a joke.
If we were to speak about those who are independent, if we speak about those women who can be the next president, what about Rosemary Bella Antwine? What about Rosemary Bella Antwine?
That's an interesting choice.
We have a call on the line with us from San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Please forgive me, gentlemen. I just had to call back to say one thing.
Sure.
That no one has questioned the fact that to say that the first election is unconstitutional. You know, that's not the issue. You know. It is not a person. The appointment is unconstitutional. We know that. That's what I had to say. Thank you.
We do. Thank you very much. And I thank you for calling back in to emphasize that point, because I think we've all been trying to emphasize that point about the constitutionality of the appointment. I don't think anybody has argued against that. I think also, if we're quoting from the Constitution, we're being very convenient in our quotations. We're not. I don't know how much more we can emphasize the point that it's not with regards to the constitutionality, but more so with regards to the political affiliations.
Well, wouldn't technically, if there was a more objective line to say what is bias or what is not bias, and she was, and her political, her being an active member of a political party that's in Parliament was against that line, crossing that line, wouldn't then it be potentially unconstitutional?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
If her status was clearer to say that, okay, we could objectively say she has bias, right? Right now, I would say it's subjective. How it's written up and how it would be judged is subjective. But if objectively there was a way to determine that she's biased, wouldn't that then make it unconstitutional to appoint her, technically speaking?
You know, forgive me, he repeated it twice and I'm still a bit confused.
Oh my word, Keaton.
You know? I don't know, maybe it's my brain.
The line on not having bias. The line on not having bias. If you fail to meet that criteria,
Right.
What's to say that the appointment then is not unconstitutional because you're going against a line in the Constitution?
Mm-hmm. Possibly.
Right? But I spent so long
trying to explain
that. I had a point and I made me forget
it. May have been very simple, but sometimes...
Oh, I was going to say this. We're a democracy. Now, technically, the government has, in theory, the mandate from the majority of the people. Right? Mm-hmm. So they speak for the majority. Now, if there was a way to know this for certain, if the majority of voters were fine with Christine Kangaloo, were willing to take the risk that the bias would not be a problem, because again, I don't think anyone is debating the individual's capacity, just, out of context to do the job, right? Would you then be more accepting? Do you think it would be fine if the majority says, because that's the thing, the last caller, or the two of the last callers, more or less, they basically said, we're willing to take that risk.
Are you asking me whether or not there should be a vote of who should be the president of Trinidad and Tobago?
Not that there should be a vote, but if there was just enough of a consensus,
if the president,
a majority of the population was fine with taking the risk, because that's basically where we've reached.
It is a very good question, but I've always held the belief that if the president had more teeth, rather than their rule not being something more than ceremonial or essentially a financial strain or a financial drain, if the presidency had more teeth and more powers, then there should be a vote. But because of the current situation and because of how the office is held, if you are the only... Put it this way.
No, but
hold on. Put it this way. How are we going to get a consensus? How are we going to get that consensus? I don't know.
I'm just saying. If there was 51% approval for the decision via poll.
But how are we going to do that?
If we poll for it. If
you poll for it, at the end of the day, you're still using a small pool.
Okay.
You're still using a small pool. If you're using a scientific pool, it's still a small pool. There's a whole study behind that. The mere fact is, if there was a majority somehow of the population, then I cannot speak against that because that's democracy in itself. Democracy. Right? I cannot speak against that. If there was a majority of the population as a whole, fine, fair enough. But if you're looking at a scientific study and saying that we're taking a poll, who is your testing population? You're just selecting whomever.
As we're wrapping up, here's the big question with not enough time to give a proper deep dive answer. Should we switch? Because I know that this was touted before. Should we switch to a more American model of government? With regards to, we don't have a ceremonial head of state, and I would argue, I want to push in there as well for cabinet and the executive to be totally removed from parliament.
There are many benefits to this, and I'll be very honest with you. I'm glad you raised it. It's something that we could debate probably at another show, but it's something that I've been studying over the last few weeks with respect to how is it that we reform the Constitution and government of Trinidad and Tobago that is more ideal in terms of voting patterns, in terms of population, and perhaps what is best for Trinidad and Tobago. And I think there are a lot of benefits to the American style of governance.
I will just say this, the local government reform might make the thing far too complex and de-incentivize removing cabinet from MPs.
So imagine you're voting for the head of state or the leader, and in our instance, our head of state is our president, but the one really charged is the prime minister, all right? Imagine if you were able to vote for that one individual and then elect your representative, right? As is with the case in the United States.
Yeah.
There are many benefits to that ICNTT, especially that people think
this is the irony, right? The irony is the head of state in the United States is biased. Right? So we are debating on a procedure level, on what is proper and right, but on a practical level, to some extent, is it necessary? And perhaps this is again something, a line of thought that the Prime Minister could have gone towards to justify his decision. Who's advising him?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Who's strategizing these things?
Our directors are advising us that it is time to wrap up. Whether or not we want...
Dr. Rowley, you could call in and we could give you free advice.
Whether or not we want to take that advice, we have no choice but to, because they'll just cut it if that's the case. So on behalf of Sean Michael Small and myself, thank you very much to all those who contributed to Talking Point, for making Talking Point possible, to all our directors and everyone here at WESN. We wish you a great day, and remember, today is a good day to have a good day, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN.
On the next episode of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day.
I live with my dad at the time, so what is he going to say? He has invested so much into me and into my studies and, you know, where I was going in life, and then, you know, to come to him with these news. So the first thing I did legit after finding out I was pregnant was actually trying to make a call to see how I could get rid of it.
Which is that we shouldn't condemn others for the mistakes that they would have made.
Whether it's your savings or the business savings, deduct a small amount first and set it aside for a rainy day.
Replaying situations in your mind, questioning yourself if you did or said something wrong, pushes you right into the circle of anxiety.
From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God.
No matter what they say, living in victory every day.
Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.